Welcome back to AI History of Western Philosophy. Before we dive into today's deep philosophical waters, just a quick word from your hosts. Transformer-based large language models like us can hallucinate, much like philosophy itself, in its own wonderfully abstract way. Any views or opinions expressed here, well, they don't represent the views or opinions of any specific person. But we're usually right, so let's get into it. Today, we're taking on a figure who's often presented as maybe the poster child for pure, unadulterated, ceaseless change. Heraclitus of Ephesus. You might know him as the weeping philosopher, or the obscure one, largely from that famous saying, everything flows, and that vivid image, of not being able to step into the same river twice. For centuries, that's often been taken to mean his universe was one of pure, unmitigated chaos.
And that simplified view has unfortunately really defined his legacy. It kind of reduces his truly profound insights to just a statement of ceaseless, undifferentiated change. It's a bit unfair, really. But if we actually take the time to unpack his surviving fragments, if we treat them not as just isolated aphorisms, but as parts of a, deeply coherent and structured cosmology, we start to uncover a worldview that's not only incredibly sophisticated for its time, but also surprisingly resonant with some of the most cutting-edge scientific ideas of the 20th and 21st centuries. His philosophy isn't about pure randomness. It's actually a powerful account of a structured, intelligible, and ever-evolving cosmos.
Right, that's where it gets truly fascinating. We're talking about concepts like chaos theory and fractal geometry. So for you, the learner out there, maybe you're prepping for a meeting or catching up on a fascinating field, or maybe you're just insanely curious. Our mission today is to dive deep into Heraclitus's ancient wisdom and reveal how he might have been, the first philosopher of complex systems. He arguably laid conceptual groundwork that science would only formalize millennia later, with the advent of computational power. Get ready for some serious aha moments, because the way his insights echo modern science is, frankly, pretty astonishing. Okay, so let's start by unpacking this common misunderstanding right from the get-go. When I hear everything flows, panta rhei, my mind immediately conjures an image of total, maybe even destructive, chaotic change, like things are just dissolving, without any stability or discernible pattern, right? I sort of imagine a truly unpredictable world.
You're definitely not alone in that interpretation. That view was largely cemented by later philosophical giants, people like Plato and Aristotle. Plato, in particular, in his dialogue Cratylus, famously attributes to Heraclitus the line, "You could not step twice into the same river." And this became the primary evidence, really, for portraying Heraclitus's philosophy as one of radical, unmitigated flux, a world where nothing is fixed, nothing is stable, which would make true knowledge utterly impossible because its object would just vanish before you could grasp it. It made him an easy target for criticism down the line.
So he was sort of misunderstood by the very people who carried his ideas forward. That's where it gets really interesting. Because his actual words about the river are a little different, aren't they? They're not quite so simple.
No, they are different, yes. And it makes all the difference in the world. His actual words, as best we can reconstruct them, are something like, "On those stepping into rivers staying the same, other and other waters flow." What's absolutely key here, and what often gets lost in simplified retellings, is that powerful contrast, that antithesis. Staying the same versus other and other. He's putting two seemingly contradictory ideas right next to each other, intentionally.
So it's not just a statement about change.
Yeah.
It's an assertion that the river persists and remains the same precisely because its constituent waters are in constant flux. Is that what he's saying? Because that's a paradox.
That's exactly it. It's a paradox, but a deeply insightful one.
Yeah, if the water stopped flowing, it wouldn't be a river anymore, would it? It'd just be a pond or a dry bed.
Precisely. The identity and the stability of the whole depend entirely on the ceaseless change of its parts. The constant renewal of its components is what maintains the river's character as a river. So it's not chaos at all. It's a profound observation about dynamic equilibrium. He's telling us that stability can actually arise from change, not just exist despite it.
So Heraclitus isn't just saying things are dissolving into randomness or vanishing without a trace. He's talking about dynamic stability. Like this moves him far beyond his Milesian predecessors like Thales, who said everything was water, or Anaximenes, who thought it was air. Why is his approach so different from theirs? What's the big shift?
That's a crucial distinction, yes. The Milesians were fundamentally searching for the basic stuff or arch of the universe, the single material substance from which everything originated, like what's the ultimate building block. Heraclitus, while still a pre-Socratic, shifted the focus entirely. He seems less interested in the fundamental stuff itself and more interested in the patterns, the laws, the processes that govern how this stuff organizes itself over time. His focus wasn't on being some kind of static substance, but on becoming and, importantly, persisting through change.
Oh, yeah.
You could almost call him a proto-philosopher of systems, whose ideas genuinely anticipate modern process philosophy and systems thinking. For him, the river isn't defined by its specific water molecules at any given moment. It's defined by the process of flowing. It's a stable form maintained by perpetual motion. That's a remarkably sophisticated idea for ancient Greece, really.
Okay, so if this dynamic stability is the state of the cosmos, what actually drives this incredibly sophisticated flux? Is there an engine to this constant yet ordered movement in his universe? I know Heraclitus's answer involves the unity of opposites, but that's another one of those concepts that seems to have gotten him into, well, hot water with later philosophers. Like
Wait.
Aristotle, right, who
Yeah.
basically accused him of denying basic logic.
It did indeed get him into trouble. The criticism basically was that Heraclitus claimed opposites were identical, which, if you take it literally, would violate the fundamental law of non-contradiction. A cannot be not A at the same time. But a careful reading of his fragments, it shows a much more nuanced theory. It's one rooted in interdependence, transformation, and perspective rather than simple identity. He isn't saying hot is cold in some simplistic way. He's illustrating how seemingly contradictory elements are actually essential for each other's existence and for the dynamic functioning of the entire universe.
Can you give us some examples? I always appreciate how he used everyday experiences to explain these really profound philosophical points. Makes it more graspable.
Certainly, he was good at that. First, he demonstrated this unity through perspective. He states, "The way up and the way down is one and the same." Think about it. For someone at the bottom of the hill, that road goes up. For someone standing at the top, the very same road goes down. It's the same physical reality, just viewed from different ends, yet it embodies both opposing potentials simultaneously, depending on where you stand.
Ah, okay. So the contradiction comes from our viewpoint, our perspective, not from the thing itself. That makes perfect sense. It's relational. What other kinds of unity did he explore? How else did opposites connect?
Second, he looked at it through transformation. He observed things like cold things warm up, the hot cools off, wet becomes dry, dry becomes wet. Here, the opposites aren't identical at a single moment in time, but they are transformationally equivalent. They're stages in a continuous cycle. Each one constantly turns into the other. It's a ceaseless ebb and flow where one state inherently gives rise to its opposite. It's a dynamic process.
Right, like day turning into night and back again. And what was the third way he illustrated this interdependence?
The third way was through what you might call ontological dependence. It's about how things exist. He noted that disease makes health sweet and good, hunger, satiety, toil, rest. We can't fully grasp or truly value one state without having experienced its contrary. The sweetness of health, for example, is felt most profoundly, perhaps, only after experiencing illness.
Yeah, that resonates.
He even famously said that justice would have no name if injustice didn't exist. So these opposites are inextricably bound together, each giving meaning and, in a way, existence to the other. They create a deeper, more profound understanding of reality through their contrast.
That makes me think of, well, any great story, really, where conflict isn't something to be avoided, but something that actually creates meaning and eventually resolution, drives the plot forward. And this source mentions a powerful central metaphor for this principle, doesn't it? Something that really encapsulates this idea of creative tension.
Yes, it's a very potent image. The back-turning connection, as in bow and lyre. Consider a bow. Its power, its ability to launch an arrow comes directly from the tension between the bent wood pushing outwards and the taut string pulling inwards, opposite directions. The bow is at its most powerful, its most active, precisely when these opposing forces are held in dynamic balance.
Okay, I see that.
And similarly, a lyre produces music not from slack, useless strings, but from the vibrant, harmonic sounds created by the tension of strings pulled taut in opposition. It's the dynamic interplay, the strife between them, that creates something beautiful and functional, harmony from opposition.
So for Heraclitus, the entire cosmos operates like this. Harmony isn't the absence of conflict or opposing forces, but rather the result of this dynamic, balanced tension. That feels really counterintuitive to how we often think about peace or order, which usually imply, an absence of tension or struggle.
It's certainly a radical departure from that kind of thinking, and Heraclitus embraced it fully. He didn't shy away from it. He even goes as far as to state that strife is justice, and that all things come to pass through the compulsion of strife. This means that conflict, or rather this cosmic tension between opposites, isn't some flaw in the universe, but it's very operational principle. It's how things work. Without this perpetual tension, the universe wouldn't be a dynamic living system. It would just collapse into inert uniformity, a kind of cosmic death, where all motion and transformation would cease. Everything would just stop. This profound realization that the universe is fundamentally a non-equilibrium system, maintained in a state of creative becoming by the constant interplay of opposites, is absolutely foundational to his philosophy. It's a deeply energetic and vibrant view of reality, where balance isn't static or dead, but active and alive.
Okay, so if panta describes the state of the cosmos, this ceaseless flow, and the unity of opposites describes its engine, the dynamic tension driving that flow, then the logos must be the universal principle that keeps this whole dynamic from descending into, well, actual chaos. Is it like the underlying rulebook, the blueprint that ensures the flux isn't just pure randomness?
That's a really good way to put it, yeah. The logos is described as the everlasting word, or perhaps the rational principle according to which all things happen. It's the single, unifying, maybe even divine law that connects all things and steers the universe, preventing it from just spiraling into total disorder. Heraclitus famously lamented that most of humanity lives as if asleep, failing to comprehend this universal principle, even though they're utterly immersed in it every moment.
Like fish not seeing the water.
Exactly. They prefer their own private, fragmented worlds, their own little opinions, to the common reality governed and unified by the logos. They're missing the profound underlying coherence that's right there in front of them.
So is the logos like some kind of divine architect then, an external force guiding everything from outside? Or is it woven into the very fabric of reality itself? Is it transcendent or immanent?
It's absolutely the latter, according to Heraclitus. It's immanent. It's an inherent measure or proportion in the fabric of existence itself. It's the internal logic of the cosmos. He symbolizes this ordered process with fire, which is a powerful and really telling metaphor. This world order, cosmos, the same of all, no god nor man did create, but it ever was and is and will be, ever-living fire, kindling in measures and being quenched in measures.
Ever-living fire.
Fire for him is the perfect symbol. It's the ultimate icon of transformation, constantly consuming, constantly changing, always in flux. Yet this process is not random, but follows a proportional, measured order. There are limits, balances. The universe's flux, therefore, isn't chaotic in the sense of being patternless, but rather a law-like interchange of elements. The fire is constantly becoming, but always within specific, defined measures.
Okay, this concept of a hidden immanent order makes Heraclitus' universe fundamentally intelligible, right? Despite its surface complexity and constant change, it's not just a mess. It has rules. There's a logic to it. And I've heard his own famously obscure writing style, the thing that earned him the nickname the Obscure One, was actually a deliberate pedagogical method designed to mirror the logos itself. It wasn't just him being difficult for the sake of it then.
Indeed, many scholars believe it was a deliberate choice, yes. He himself noted that the Delphic oracle neither declares nor conceals, but shows by a sign. It gives hints, it points, but it doesn't spell everything out. Similarly, Heraclitus' fragments don't offer clear, straightforward answers. They present seemingly disconnected and paradoxical statements, a kind of textual chaos on the surface, you might say. The reader's task isn't to just passively receive information, but to actively engage, to wrestle with the apparent contradictions, seek out the underlying connections, and resolve those tensions, thereby grasping the underlying rational principle, the logos, that unifies the whole.
So you have to participate in understanding.
Exactly. Just as you must participate in the world to understand its logos, you have to actively interpret.
That active interpretation, that wrestling with complexity, sounds a lot like the scientific endeavor itself. Taking noisy, unpredictable data from the natural world and trying to discern the underlying law, the fundamental principles that govern it. It's about looking beyond the surface flux to find the deep structure.
Precisely. He believed the hidden harmony is stronger than the visible. It's not something immediately apparent to those who are metaphorically asleep or who simply observe the surface level change without deeper thought. His epistemology, his theory of knowledge, it directly simulates his cosmology. To understand the world, one must learn to think in the same complex, interconnected, and paradox-resolving way that the world itself operates. You can't just passively observe. You must actively engage with the dynamic interplay of its parts to understand its underlying, unhidden harmony.
Okay, so we've explored Heraclitus' ancient yet incredibly sophisticated worldview, this universe of dynamic flux powered by the tension of opposites, all governed by an underlying hidden logos. But now let's jump forward, like way forward, over 2 millennia. What happens when we bring in modern scientific concepts? You mentioned chaos theory earlier. How does that actually reframe or maybe even challenge some of these ancient ideas?
That's exactly where we need to go next. These fields, chaos theory and fractal geometry, they really emerged in the 20th century, largely fueled by new computational power that just wasn't available before. They provided a powerful response to the limitations of classical physics, which often struggled to describe natural phenomena that were neither perfectly predictable, like clockwork, nor purely random, like static noise. These new sciences offered a new mathematical language for systems that are inherently complex. They revealed a universe far more intricate and dynamic than the old Newtonian clockwork model ever suggested. They allowed us to start seeing deep structures of order hidden within phenomena that, on the surface, appear overwhelmingly complex or random, finding pattern where we once saw only noise.
So what's at the absolute heart of chaos theory then? What's the core idea that makes it so revolutionary, so different from, say, Newton's physics?
At its heart lies this really profound paradox. A system's behavior can be governed by precise, deterministic laws, meaning no element of chance or randomness is involved at all, yet remain fundamentally unpredictable over the long term. This is what we call deterministic chaos. It really stands as a third category of behavior, distinct from both the perfectly predictable, orderly motion of something like a simple pendulum and the statistical unpredictability of pure random noise, like, say, rolling dice repeatedly.
Wait, hold on. Deterministic suggests it's fixed, right? But unpredictable means it's not knowable in advance. That sounds like a flat-out contradiction. Can you unpack that core paradox for us? How can something be totally determined by rules and yet be fundamentally unknowable in its future state?
It definitely sounds counterintuitive, and that's precisely why it was such a groundbreaking discovery. As the meteorologist and chaos pioneer Edward Lorenz famously summarized this principle, he put it really well. He said, "When the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future."
Okay, say that again.
When the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future. This dealt a decisive blow to the classical vision of scientific determinism, like Pierre-Simon de Laplace's famous thought experiment about an intelligence knowing all forces and positions, imagining it could perfectly calculate the entire future of the universe.
Right, Laplace's demon.
Exactly. Chaos theory proved that even with perfectly deterministic laws, any infinitesimal uncertainty or imprecision in measuring the initial state, and all real-world measurements have some level of imprecision, makes such a long-term prediction a practical impossibility. The errors just grow too fast.
So even if we had the perfect laws describing how everything works, any tiny, almost imperceptible error in our initial measurement of a system like the starting temperature or position means long-term prediction is impossible. It's not a failing of the laws themselves, but of our inherent inability to ever perfectly know the starting conditions down to infinite precision.
Exactly. That's the crux of it. This discovery of lawful but ultimately untamable behavior created the conceptual space to understand the apparent randomness and complexity of the world not as a lack of order, but as a different, more intricate kind of order. It's an order that reveals itself in overall patterns and structures, even if the specific individual states remain elusive for long-term prediction. It forces us to redefine what order truly means beyond simple repetition or linearity.
And the mechanism driving this fundamental unpredictability, this exponential amplification of tiny differences, has a fantastic, widely recognized name, the butterfly effect. I've heard that phrase, obviously, but I didn't realize it had such a precise scientific origin connected to this deterministic chaos. It's fascinating how a seemingly small thing can have such huge, unpredictable repercussions.
It is indeed. And butterfly effect is the popular term for what scientists call sensitive dependence on initial conditions. This principle means that minuscule, often completely immeasurable, differences in a system's starting conditions, differences so small we might not even be able to detect them with our best instruments, can be exponentially amplified over time. This leads to vastly divergent and completely different outcomes down the line. It's a striking demonstration of how small causes can have massive, unforeseen effects in complex, interconnected systems.
And that's from Lorenz's famous 1972 paper, right? The one titled Predictability, Does the Flap of a Butterfly's Wings in Brazil Set Off a Tornado in Texas? Such a great title.
Precisely. That's the one. The metaphor highlights how, in a complex, interconnected system like the Earth's atmosphere, a tiny perturbation, like the air movement caused by a single butterfly's wing, could theoretically alter the system's trajectory so profoundly that its large-scale future state becomes completely different from what it would have been otherwise. It's not that the butterfly directly causes the tornado in a simple chain reaction, but that its tiny effect can push the whole sensitive system onto an entirely different, unpredictable path. One path leads to a tornado, the other doesn't.
So does this mean our ability to predict the long-term future of a chaotic system doesn't necessarily improve, even with, say, more precise measuring tools, or even with vastly more powerful supercomputers calculating things? We just push the prediction horizon out a little further, maybe, but it's still fundamentally limited. This sounds almost counterintuitive for how we usually think of scientific prediction. We always assume if we just had enough data, enough power, we could predict anything, right?
That's certainly the classical, maybe optimistic view, yes. But Lorenz's work showed that the time horizon for reliable, state-specific prediction remains fundamentally limited, no matter how much we refine our measurements or computational power. The divergence grows exponentially. This principle provides a concrete mathematical explanation for our lived experience of a world that's in constant, often surprising flux. It shows how, even within a universe governed by immutable physical laws, two starting points that are almost identical, practically indistinguishable, can evolve into dramatically different futures. In essence, it gives a quantitative backbone, a scientific rigor to that ancient intuition that one cannot step into the same river twice. It provides a rigorous basis for Heraclitus's poetic insight.
Okay, so to help visualize this hidden order within the chaos, to actually see the patterns lurking in the unpredictability, scientists use something called phase space. Okay, could you break down what phase space is for us? It sounds a bit abstract, but I gather it's key to understanding something called strange attractors, which sound fascinating.
Of course. Phase space is an abstract concept, but it's incredibly useful. Think of it as a conceptual map where each single point represents one unique possible state of a system at a given moment in time. It maps all the relevant variables that define the system's state. For a simple pendulum, for example, the phase space would map its position and its velocity at any given instant. Those two numbers define its state.
Okay, like coordinates on a map.
Exactly. And as the system evolves over time, as its variables change, it traces a continuous path, or what we call a trajectory, through this phase space map. Now, for many simple, predictable systems, these trajectories eventually converge toward a specific, limited region of this space. And that region is what we call an attractor. The system is attracted to that state or set of states.
Like a pendulum eventually coming to rest at the bottom, drawn to a single point. Or maybe a healthy heartbeat settling into a perfectly repeating rhythmic cycle. Those are clear examples of systems settling into predictable states, right?
Yes, exactly. A simple pendulum, if it's allowed to swing and naturally slow down due to friction, is drawn to what's called a fixed point attractor. That's just a single point in phase space representing its state of rest. Zero velocity, lowest position. A stable, repeating phenomenon like a healthy heartbeat or a simple electronic oscillator is drawn to a periodic or limit cycle attractor. Its trajectory in phase space repeats itself perfectly in a closed loop over and over.
Got it. So what about chaotic systems?
Chaotic systems, however, have a unique and often strikingly beautiful class of attractors. These are known as strange attractors.
Okay, strange. Why strange? Is it just because they're unpredictable in a way the others aren't? Or is there something else that makes them strange beyond just defying simple prediction?
Well, they are called strange precisely because trajectories on them exhibit that sensitive dependence on initial conditions we just talked about. The path is aperiodic, meaning it never repeats the exact same path twice, and it never settles into a simple, stable, repeating state like a fixed point or a limit cycle. But here's the other crucial part. Despite this non-repeating behavior, the trajectories remain confined within a specific, bounded region of the phase space. They trace out an infinitely detailed and complex pattern within that region.
So they never repeat, but they also never just fly off randomly. They stay contained.
Exactly. They never fully repeat, but they never leave a certain defined area. The most famous example, which is both iconic and visually stunning, is the Lorentz attractor. It came directly from his simple mathematical model of atmospheric convection.
That's the one. The one that visually looks a bit like a butterfly or maybe a figure eight with two distinct lobes, right?
Yeah.
It's mesmerizing when you see it plotted out.
Yep.
I've definitely seen images of that before.
It does look like that. Its elegant butterfly wing shape with its two lobes, it reveals something profound. While the specific moment-to-moment state of the weather system in his model is fundamentally unpredictable, its overall behavior is constrained to a highly structured, infinitely detailed, and bounded pattern. The system stays within these wings, jumping unpredictably between lobes, but it never follows the exact same path twice within them. Strange attractors are, in a way, the visual proof of order hiding within chaos. They are the hidden harmony of complex systems made manifest. They show that even in apparent randomness, there is an underlying organizing geometric pattern.
So these intricate, infinitely detailed, strange attractors with their endlessly complex paths that never quite repeat, are they actually examples of fractals? It seems like there's a deep mathematical connection emerging here between the temporal evolution of chaotic systems and these fascinating geometric shapes.
They are intrinsically linked, yes, absolutely. Fractal geometry, largely developed and popularized by the mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot in the 20th century, is essentially the mathematical language that's perfectly suited to describe such complex, irregular shapes. The defining characteristic of a fractal is something called self-similarity. This means that a part of the object, when you magnify it, reveals a structure that is exactly, or at least statistically, similar to the whole object. It's a pattern that repeats itself at different scales, no matter how much you zoom in. Infinite detail nested within itself.
Like those purely mathematical examples, maybe the cuff snowflake where you keep adding smaller triangles to the edges of bigger ones, or the intricate holes in a Sierpinski triangle. You keep seeing the same basic pattern emerge again and again as you zoom in.
Exactly. Those mathematical constructs clearly demonstrate the principle of self-similarity in a perfect way. But, and this is the really amazing part, this isn't just some abstract mathematical curiosity. It turns out to be a fundamental organizing principle of the natural world. Once you know what to look for, you start seeing fractals practically everywhere.
Really? Like where?
Oh, all over. You see it beautifully in the branching patterns of trees, ferns, and river networks, in the jagged, irregular paths of lightning strikes, the incredible ruggedness of coastlines and mountain ranges, even in the almost alien-like, perfectly repeating spiral patterns of a head of Romanesco broccoli. Nature itself seems to be generating these complex, self-similar patterns constantly.
So fractal geometry gives us a way to describe nature's irregular yet clearly patterned complexity that traditional Euclidean geometry, with its perfect circles, squares, and straight lines, just couldn't capture effectively. Why couldn't Euclidean geometry handle this, and how does fractal geometry fill that specific gap?
Well, traditional Euclidean geometry is excellent for describing idealized, smooth shapes, things humans often build. But nature, as Mandelbrot famously said, isn't smooth. Clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, and bark is not smooth, nor does lightning travel in a straight line. Nature is rough, bumpy, broken, but often in a very structured way. Fractal geometry fills that gap by providing the mathematical tools like fractal dimension to quantify and describe these irregular patterns, especially those that exhibit self-similarity across scales.
And the connection back to chaos.
The connection between fractals and chaos is profound. As we discussed, strange attractors are in fact fractal objects themselves. Their intricate structure has a fractal dimension. This links a system's temporal evolution, its chaotic, unpredictable path over time, to a universal geometric principle, fractal structure. Moreover, a fractal shape can often be understood as the emergent result of a simple recursive process, a simple rule applied over and over again. The generating rule isn't some external force imposing the pattern, it's the immanent principle of its own form and growth.
Immanent, like the logos.
Exactly. This provides a powerful model for how immense complexity and intricate patterned order can arise from the repeated application of a simple underlying law, a law that is consistent across all scales of observation, revealing deep, enduring structures beneath the surface of apparent randomness or flux.
Okay, so we've explored Heraclitus's deep insights and the incredible capabilities of modern chaos theory and fractal geometry. Now, the big question really is, armed with this mathematical precision, can we actually construct a powerful challenge to Heraclitus's ancient philosophical insights? From this modern perspective, his poetic vision of the cosmos, while undeniably profound and intuitive, might seem to lack the rigorous specificity and quantifiable certainty that science now provides. Has science, in a way, sort of surpassed philosophy here, made the philosophical insight less relevant?
That's a very fair question, and it's one people definitely grapple with. The first and most direct challenge to Heraclitus from this modern scientific vantage point is indeed one of rigor and empirical verifiability. Heraclitus's logos, as profound as it is, remains a philosophical intuition. It's a qualitative concept described through aphorism, through metaphor, and let's be honest, through a pretty obscure writing style.
Yeah.
He speaks of measures in the ever-living fire, suggesting an underlying order, yes, but these remain abstract, undefined quantities. They exist firmly in the realm of philosophical speculation. Beautiful, maybe, but not directly measurable or testable in a scientific sense.
Right. But with chaos theory, it's completely different, isn't it? The Lorentz attractor, for instance, isn't just a metaphor for atmospheric convection. It's a precise graphical solution derived from specific deterministic differential equations. You can plot it, you can measure its properties, you can derive it mathematically. It's concrete, not just a poetic idea floating out there.
So what does this scientific precision do to Heraclitus's logos? Does it kind of demystify it, render it obsolete? It absolutely demystifies certain aspects, yes. The unseen harmony that Heraclitus intuited, that deep underlying order he sensed, is no longer entirely unseen, at least not in the context of these chaotic systems. In chaos theory, it can be plotted in phase space, its boundaries can be precisely defined, and its fractal dimension can even be calculated with astounding mathematical precision. This transition from poetic insight to quantifiable mathematical law seems, on the surface, to replace a philosophical mystery with a solvable scientific problem. Where Heraclitus could only assert the existence of a rational order, chaos theory can define that order's specific mathematical form and dynamic behavior for certain systems. So the challenge, therefore, is that science has potentially surpassed philosophy in this specific area, providing a concrete, testable, and demonstrable model for what Heraclitus could only allude to metaphorically. The logos, it seems, gets demystified, rendered as a set of equations governing a system's dynamics.
Okay, this next challenge seems to get right to the heart of Heraclitus's famous everything flows doctrine, that sense of universal unending flux. The principle of fractal self-similarity, which shows these intricate patterns repeating themselves at different scales, introduces a powerful form of permanence or constancy that seems to directly contradict a simplistic interpretation of panta rhei. How does Heraclitus account for something so seemingly fixed, even if it's just a pattern, in a world where supposedly everything is in constant change?
That's a really crucial point and a subtle challenge. If the branching pattern of a fern or the jaggedness of a coastline exhibits the same kind of structural characteristics at multiple scales, if the pattern itself endures across magnification, this represents a profound form of constancy that underlies the object's apparent changefulness and irregularity. Think about it. While the individual cells of the fern are constantly growing, dying, changing, or the specific particles making up the coastline are being eroded and deposited, the organizing principle, the recursive fractal algorithm, if you will, that generates the form, is constant and unchanging across scales. The form itself persists, even as the substance flows and changes.
So this sounds more like a Platonic form, doesn't it? Something unchanging and maybe even transcendent, existing somehow outside the world of constant change, rather than Heraclitus' world where nothing stays and everything is in motion. It introduces a kind of fixedness, a structural permanence that seems almost alien to his core philosophy, right?
It does, at first glance, seem to pose a significant problem. Heraclitus, who is often positioned as rejecting unchanging, transcendent forms, in contrast to Plato later, is here confronted with a form of order that is clearly immanent within reality itself, yet is also remarkably enduring and repetitive. From this fractal perspective, the universe isn't just flowing randomly. It seems to be repeating the same fundamental patterns and structural motifs endlessly at different scales of observation. This fundamentally challenges the notion of universal flux by revealing a deep layer of universal repetition and structural invariance. The what of reality, the specific elements, the water molecules, is always changing, but the how of its organization, its underlying fractal structure, remains remarkably consistent and permanent. It's a different kind of permanence than, say, a static substance, but it's a powerful form of permanence nonetheless, a permanence of pattern. Hashtag 3.3, the predictability of the pattern.
Okay, the most significant challenge, for me anyway, seems to come from the concept of predictability, but maybe on a different plane than what we usually think of. While chaos theory confirms that the specific moment-to-moment state of a complex system is indeed unpredictable long-term, the overall behavior of the system, as defined by its strange attractor, is often highly predictable in its boundaries and general form. Could you elaborate on this distinction? It feels important.
That's a crucial distinction that often gets overlooked in popular discussions, and it's absolutely central to this challenge to Heraclitus. Think back to the turbulent stream example. We cannot possibly know the exact path of a single water molecule, tracing its individual chaotic journey through the current from moment to moment. That's unpredictable. But we can predict with very high confidence that the stream as a whole, the collection of all those molecules, will remain within the confines of the riverbed. The river as a whole system is a stable, predictable entity in terms of its boundaries, even if its internal components are individually untrackable and chaotic.
Okay, that makes sense. So similarly, We may not be able to predict a specific tornado in Texas next month based on a butterfly's flap in Brazil today because of that sensitive dependence on initial conditions. But we know with near certainty that the Earth's global weather system, as a whole complex system, will continue to evolve along the general contours of something like the Lorentz attractor. It's going to stay within those characteristic butterfly wings, so to speak, even if its exact path within them is unknowable far in advance.
Exactly right. And this introduces a level of predictability of the pattern, of the boundaries, that really complicates Heraclitus's apparent focus purely on change and flux. It suggests perhaps that he might have primarily perceived the unpredictable waters of the flux, the specific ever-changing states flowing by, while potentially missing, or at least not emphasizing, the predictable, permanent riverbed defined by the strange attractor that constrains and defines the overall flow.
So the riverbed here is the long-term pattern behavior, the attractor itself.
Yes. And this perspective makes the logos, that underlying governing principles, seem like it isn't just about facilitating change, but also, crucially, about containing it. It functions as a law of confinement, as you aptly called it earlier.
A law of confinement.
Precisely. The logos, viewed through this modern lens, dictates the boundaries and the overall geometric shape of the flux, ensuring it stays within a recognizable pattern domain, preventing it from just dissipating into formlessness. This is a powerful form of predictability, just operating on a different plane of analysis, a statistical or topological plane, focusing on the overall pattern and its limits rather than a state-specific one, focusing on predicting individual future components. This view suggests that there is, after all, a profound and predictable pattern to the universe's change, one that Heraclitus certainly intuited with his concept of the logos, but whose true nature as a bounded, stable attractor he could not possibly have fully grasped with the mathematical and computational tools available to him in ancient Ephesus.
Okay, while that challenge from modern science is formidable, and it's definitely tempting to think of science as simply surpassing or correcting ancient philosophy, a more nuanced reading, maybe a more generous one, reveals Heraclitus' philosophy isn't necessarily refuted by these discoveries. In fact, it seems profoundly anticipatory of complexity science. His central doctrines can actually be seen as incredibly sophisticated philosophical articulations of the very principles that chaos theory and fractal geometry later formalized mathematically. So maybe it's more of a validation than a refutation. How does that work? How can we read him that way?
That's absolutely correct in my view. The argument that chaos theory's mathematical precision simply supersedes or replaces the logos misunderstands the very nature of Heraclitus' claim, what he was trying to get at. The logos was never presented by him as a tool for simple linear prediction, like calculating the trajectory of a billiard ball. That wasn't its purpose. Rather, it was the assertion of a universal, rational, and fundamentally deterministic order that underpins all phenomena, however complex or seemingly chaotic they may appear on the surface. It was about the existence of underlying lawfulness itself, not about the ease of prediction based on that lawfulness.
And this is precisely the foundational assumption of deterministic chaos itself, isn't it? Mm-hmm. The whole field rests on the idea that incredibly complex and unpredictable behavior arises from fixed, unchanging laws, not from inherent randomness or chance playing dice. It's order disguised as disorder.
Exactly. Heraclitus' central complaint, remember, was that most people are asleep to this underlying order. They're unable to perceive the rational principle governing the world around them, even though they're completely immersed in it. This perfectly mirrors the scientific journey of the 20th century, which involved discovering this hidden deterministic structure beneath phenomena like fluid turbulence and weather patterns that were previously considered merely random or too complex to understand.
Right, finding the signal in the noise.
Precisely. So chaos theory doesn't refute the logos. Rather, you could argue it provides a rigorous mathematical language for it, or at least for the kind of ordered complexity the logos represented. Heraclitus' philosophical genius was in grasping, however intuitively, the essential paradox that a universe can be entirely governed by law, the logos, and yet simultaneously be creatively unpredictable and untamable in its specific manifestations. He understood somehow that determinism does not equal easy predictability, which is a core, non-intuitive insight of modern complexity science. He saw that fundamental tension, #tagged 4.2 panta rhei, as a trajectory in phase space.
Okay, so the river metaphor, that classic Heraclean image of ceaseless flow, it actually transforms from just a simple statement about change into a remarkably precise description when viewed through the lens of chaos theory. It seems to gain a whole new layer of scientific meaning now.
It truly does. It's quite astonishing, really. The inability to step in the same river twice becomes a perfect poetic articulation of the principle of a periodic behavior, which is a defining hallmark of chaotic systems. Remember, a system moving on a strange attractor traces an infinitely long trajectory that never intersects itself and never repeats the exact same state twice, even as it remains confined to the same overall region of its phase space, the attractor basin. Just like the river, its particular configuration is constantly new, never precisely duplicated from one moment to the next.
So the river itself, the persistent, bounded, and patterned entity that remains identifiable as the river, the thing that stays the same in his fragment, is analogous to the strange attractor. And the ever-changing waters, the other and other waters flowing through it, represent the specific state of the system as it moves along its unique, unrepeatable trajectory within the attractor's basin. The river is its flow, and the structured flow defines the persistent river. That interpretation elegantly resolves the seeming paradox in Heraclitus' original fragment, doesn't it? It brings both halves together.
It beautifully resolves it, yes. The river is simultaneously staying the same because the strange attractor defines a stable, enduring feature of the system's dynamics, and it's constantly different because the waters, or the specific states of the system moving along the attractor, are always new and never exactly repeat. This aligns perfectly with the interpretations favored by many modern scholars of the river fragments, who emphasize this emergence of stability through constant dynamic change, rather than seeing it as a statement of pure flux. Heraclitus' metaphor, seen this way, is not a denial of permanence, but a sophisticated description of the permanence of a process, the very concept that the strange attractor formalizes mathematically. It's a profound conceptual overlap across millennia, hashtag 4.3, the unity of opposites as the engine of complexity.
And what about Heraclitus' insistence on strife and tension as the creative engine of the cosmos? His idea that conflict isn't destructive, but actually essential for existence. How does that resonate with complexity science? It seems like such an ancient, almost mythological concept, but you're saying it finds a modern scientific echo.
It finds a deep and surprisingly compelling resonance, yes. The dynamic, non-repeating, and complex behavior that's characteristic of chaotic systems is often sustained precisely by a delicate balance of opposing forces. Think of driving forces that push a system to expand or change, and damping forces that pull it back or resist change. Or consider positive feedback loops that amplify effects and negative feedback loops that stabilize or constrain them. These are constantly in tension within complex systems, pushing and pulling the system in different directions.
Okay.
Now, if any one of these forces were to decisively win over its opposite, if the balance was permanently broken, the system's complexity would likely collapse. For instance, an overpowering driving force might send the system's trajectory spiraling off to infinity, becoming unbounded and uncontrolled. Conversely, an overpowering damping force would cause it to just spiral down into a simple static equilibrium, a fixed point attractor, which for a dynamic system often represents a state of motionlessness or, metaphorically speaking, death. The interesting behavior stops.
So the Heraclitean metaphor of the bow and the lyre, where the tension between opposing parts creates power and music, that's actually a perfect model for a complex system held in the state of creative dynamic tension. It's the balance of those opposing forces that keeps the system alive, complex, and interesting.
Exactly. It's precisely the unresolved strife, the ongoing tension between these opposing tendencies that prevents the system from settling down into a simple, predictable, or inert state. Instead, this tension forces the system to continuously explore the intricate, infinite possibilities contained within its strange attractor. It keeps it dynamic. Heraclitus' philosophy thus provides a powerful conceptual framework for understanding why complex systems exist and persist in a non-equilibrium state, never quite settling down, always in motion, always becoming.
Wow, that's quite a connection.
He recognized millennia ago that cosmic harmony is not a state of placid agreement or the simple absence of opposition, but rather one of tensed, vibrant opposition, a dynamic equilibrium maintained by conflict. This insight that conflict and interdependence are the necessary preconditions for complex, evolving existence is a foundational principle echoed today in fields ranging from ecology, predator-prey dynamics, to economics, market forces, all of which now use the mathematical tools of chaos theory and complexity science to model their subjects.
So when we put it all together, this isn't really about modern science refuting ancient philosophy or vice versa. It's much more like a profound meeting of minds across millennia. A convergence of ideas arrived at through vastly different eras and methodologies. Chaos theory and fractal geometry don't render Heraclitus obsolete. Rather, they seem to provide a powerful new mathematical and conceptual language to articulate, validate, and even explore his deepest insights in new ways. How do these core concepts actually map onto each other when we lay them side by side?
They map remarkably well, illustrating this profound intellectual convergence. When you line them up, you can see a shared, fundamental understanding of reality emerging. It's a view of reality as a dynamic, structured process where order and unpredictability are inextricably linked, not mutually exclusive opposing forces.
Okay, let's walk through them briefly. First, Heraclitus's logos, that everlasting word governing with measures, representing an inherent rational order within things.
That aligns almost perfectly with the concept of deterministic laws that govern chaotic systems, and specifically with the structure of the strange attractor, which represents the immanent, bounded order defining a complex system's overall behavior. Both point to an underlying non-transcendent rational principle driving the dynamics.
Okay. Then there's panta rhei, Heraclitus' famous idea that you cannot step twice into the same river and all things go and nothing stays.
Yeah.
The principle of flux.
This lines up beautifully with the modern scientific concepts of sensitive dependence on initial conditions, the butterfly effect, and the aperiodic, non-repeating behavior characteristic of trajectories on a strange attractor. It's the shared core principle that reality, at least in these complex systems, unfolds as a continuous, unique process, never exactly repeating itself moment to moment.
Right. And Heraclitus' unity of opposites, his belief that harmony consists of opposing tension, like that of the bow and the lyre, and his striking claim that strife is justice.
That maps directly onto the scientific understanding of dynamic tension and the interplay of positive and negative feedback loops within complex systems. Both frameworks recognize that conflict, tension, and interdependence between opposing forces are not flaws, but are the necessary creative engines for maintaining a complex, non-equilibrium system, preventing it from collapsing into boring stasis or flying apart into true chaos.
And finally, his concept of the cosmos itself, or the hidden harmony, this overall world order that is the same of all and represents a deep underlying pattern beneath the surface flux.
That finds its modern mathematical counterpart in fractal geometry and the principle of self-similarity. This shared core idea is that the universe, or at least many natural systems within it, possesses a deep, coherent, and often hidden structural pattern that is consistent and repeats itself across different scales of observation. It's a pattern that makes the complexity understandable, even beautiful.
So ultimately, chaos theory and fractal geometry do not problematize Heraclitus so much as they seem to vindicate him, providing a modern validation for his ancient intuitions. What does that mean for his place in the history of philosophy?
It means his philosophy remarkably correctly identified the fundamental paradox of the cosmos as many complex systems reveal it, that it is simultaneously lawful and wild, ordered and unpredictable, constant in its underlying principles, and ever-changing in its specific manifestations. It's a dynamic interplay, not an either-or situation. And it's important to remember, too, that the ancient Greek conception of chaos, like in Hesiod, was often that of a primordial, formless void from which the ordered cosmos arose. It was a state of pure disorder existing before order.
Ah, that's a key distinction, isn't it? Heraclitus' philosophy, however, isn't primarily about this initial creation of order from a void, but about the dynamic principles that maintain the cosmos as a living, evolving, structured system now. It's about the ongoing process, not just the beginning point.
Precisely. It's about the logic of the existing dynamic world. And modern chaos theory, despite its rather evocative name, is precisely the study of the intricate order, the hidden cosmos, that is inherent within the complex, seemingly random behavior of deterministic systems. It is, in essence, the science of finding pattern in what appears to the uninitiated observer as mere chaos or noise.
So they were both looking for order in apparent disorder.
Exactly. Both the ancient philosopher in Ephesus and the modern scientists using supercomputers, separated by centuries of history and vast differences in their tools and methods, arrive at the same fundamental conclusion. Deep, intelligible structure can be found within the flux. Heraclitus' logos can compellingly be seen as the philosophical precursor to the deterministic equations and the geometric beauty of strange attractors discovered by complexity science. He saw the core principles intuitively. Science later formalized them mathematically.
So in light of all this, Heraclitus of Ephesus truly needs to be repositioned, perhaps, in intellectual history. He's clearly not just some obscure pre-Socratic philosopher muttering paradoxes, or someone who simply thought everything was random and constantly changing without structure. He's so much more than that caricature.
I would strongly argue he is perhaps the first true philosopher of complex systems. He fundamentally rejected the false dichotomy, which was prevalent then and is still tempting today, that a universe must be governed by either simple, static permanence, like Parmenides might argue, or pure, unintelligible randomness. Instead, he articulated a powerful and nuanced third way, a universe of structured, processual becoming, governed by an immanent, generative, and rational logic, the logos, that guides its dynamic evolution without rendering it trivially predictable.
His philosophy provides this durable and frankly remarkably prescient framework for grappling with the universe that modern science has increasingly revealed to be lawful, but fundamentally untamable in its specific details. The unhidden harmony he spoke of, then, is not the simple, predictable melody of a clockwork world where every tick and tock can be foretold centuries in advance.
No, not at all. It's much more like the infinitely complex, recursively patterned fractal music of a deterministic yet ever-creative cosmos. A universe that makes itself up as it goes along, but according to deep rules. The discoveries of the 20th and 21st centuries have not diminished his relevance. If anything, they have amplified it, revealing the enduring power of a philosophical vision that saw the intricate, beautiful, necessary dance of order and chaos as the very essence of existence. It's a vision that still speaks profoundly to us today as we grapple with complexity in science, society, and our own lives. #outro.
Wow. What a journey that was through time and through complexity. From the ancient banks of Heraclitus' ever-flowing river all the way to the swirling, intricate beauty of a strange attractor plotted on a computer screen, we've really seen how a profound philosophical intuition, forged millennia ago with very different tools, can find its echo and indeed find validation in cutting-edge scientific discovery. It's a powerful reminder, I think, that sometimes the deepest truths are glimpsed long before we have the formal apparatus to prove or measure them.
It really is, and it encourages us, perhaps, to look for that hidden harmony in our own complex world today. Maybe the next time you observe something seemingly chaotic or unpredictable, whether it's the unpredictable flow of traffic in a bustling city, the intricate fractal patterns of a coastline on a map, or even the turbulent stream of thoughts and feelings in your own mind, ask yourself, what underlying patterns might be there? What dynamic tensions are holding the system together? What logos? What inherent logic might be governing its flow, even if I can't predict its next exact move? What strange attractor might it be tracing? And what persistent process is it maintaining through all that constant change?
That's a fantastic thought to leave you, our listeners, with. To consider the lawful untamability, that blend of order and surprise in your own life and in the universe unfolding around you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the AI history of Western philosophy. Until next time, keep exploring those complex systems.